that would outline how those would be regulated. And just by example, those have been included on the last page in the conclusion. Some of the things that council may want to consider: an initial application and or site inspection, regulating the maximum number. If it is just for personal consumption or family consumption, certainly 3 or 4 hens is more than appropriate. Looking at perhaps a signed neighbor consent form. Most neighbors wouldn't have a problem, but if someone is aggrieved and they have no other location in which to reside, if chickens are in theory permitted in every residential area. Talking about regulating being at large and where those coops would be located in the rear yard with setbacks and so on. So we're hoping the information does provide a bit of a balanced approach, but we do believe that it's staff's responsibility to provide a recommendation as we've put forward. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Comments? Councillor Black, Height, and Wells.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Baird, I'm interested to know, why can't we just do it for maybe the hamlets instead of the urban area? Or let's say if all the people, or most of the people, because you'll never get all, the people in Waterford, if they want chickens, let them have chickens. But another community doesn't want to have chickens. Why should they be forced to have chickens just because another community wants chickens? So why can't we split it up that way? I know it's like a chicken soup, but...
Through the chair, I think anytime we want to put forward some recommendations, they have to be fair for everybody. And to tell someone who lives in an urban area versus a hamlet area is creating some imbalance, or one community over another community. I think it's the zone, the residential zone, be it hamlet, rural hamlet, or within an urban serviced area. We didn't look at any non-agricultural property as technically industrial or commercial or institutional. We don't see that really being the case. It's really about having an egg-laying hen that's in your backyard where you can have a supply of fresh eggs.
Okay.
So it's really about fairness. I think council would be introducing some disadvantage for one community over another, or one zone from another. So we looked at it purely as residential across the board.
Okay, thank you. And secondly, you did mention that there may be, or probably will be, increased need for bylaw enforcement. Are you talking about having to hire another person, or I know that bylaws are already stretched and probably could use 1 or 2 other MLEOs to do our enforcement properly. So would we be looking at another person, or just added costs over time, that sort of thing?
Through the chair, I think it's pretty clear we understand council's position on staffing levels. One could say it's the straw that breaks the camel's back. At what point do we need an additional bylaw officer? I don't think that's the point. It is the fact that there's only so many people, MLEOs, to do that enforcement piece. What would happen is that our response times to other equally competing bylaws would be prolonged. So we wouldn't have that response time. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, from what I hear, they're already prolonged, and that's not staff's fault. That's I think we're underserviced that way. Thank you.
Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you to Mr. Baird, I noticed you've done some research on other municipalities, and you've come up with a couple options here on page 5 of our report, or 37 of our agenda. And it says here, an initial application and site inspection be undertaken. And then you also are asking for a signed neighbor consent form. But I noticed that Kitchener, basically what they had was a $50 application fee. And that seems like a cost recovery if there is a problem for bylaw, and I'm wondering why you didn't bring that option forward in this report.
Through the chair, this is actually an excerpt from the City of Kitchener, so well done. You've recognized some of the areas. These are things that have been considered sort of best practices. Without getting into it, that would be a decision. If council decides to approve it, that there should be, we're recommending an application and or site inspection and or fee that decision can be made later. We didn't want to research things to the finite detail, but rather provide some things to think about that could very easily be another item to explore if that's the direction the council wishes to follow.
Okay, good, because like one of the things I've noticed too is some of your setbacks, like the second last bullet, you got 2.5 meters from the rear lot line, and in Kitchener is only 1.2, and that might be because of the size of the lots, but I think people would want, you typically put your sheds at the back. Is there a setback for a shed that's 2.5 meters?
For accessory uses like sheds in backyards, it is generally 1.5 meters. Again, these are suggestions. We're hoping that this isn't a tiny lot in town that's going to be, create that density problem. But it could very equally, if it did comply with something like our zoning bylaw, 1.5 from rear yard and 1.5 from side yard. That's certainly no problem, if
Okay.
that's an option.
And then during, through the chair to Mr. Barrett again, during your research, you found that, was it on average it was 6 chickens, or was that the maximum chickens that people were allowed?
Through the chair, in some cases it was 2 hens, in others it was upwards of 10. They'd gone so far as to look at researching the average egg-laying hen, produces more eggs in its younger years, but it can live to be 10 years of age and its egg production declines. What's appropriate? Is it a family of 10, or is it a family of 2, or are you sharing and or selling eggs? We thought 4 would be, again, a suggested number that would provide, an appropriate number of eggs on a regular basis.
Okay, because that's the point I'm looking at as well. If you have a family of 4, chickens don't lay an egg every single day, so then the youngest child gets gypped off from the good tasting egg. But with that, Mr. Barrett, I'm going to move a motion that we receive this as information and the council approve the raising of egg-laying chickens within the hamlet residential zone in Norfolk County for a trial period of 1 year. And I'm hoping at that point we could we'll bring it back to council for another discussion. I'd probably move ahead with Port Rowan as a test site for chickens in an urban area, but maybe we could just try out the hamlets for right now and see how that works out. I like the options that Mr. Baird's presented us. I think 6 chickens is better than 4. I don't know about the neighbor. The neighbor signed consent form, because if you have 4 neighbors, you're going to go to each one of them. I'm not sure about that and things like that, but we'll leave it to staff. But that's my motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay, the clerk's got it. Councillor Wells, Councillor Columbus, Mayor Luke, and Sonnenberg.
Just for clarification, when we talk about chickens, that's motions on the floor, chickens in the urban and hamlet residential zones in Norfolk County, does that mean we're having if this passes, we'd have chickens in all of Norfolk County, or is there
Basically,
restrictions?
Councillor Height talks about the hamlets.
So just the hamlets? Well, and I heard that, 1 year trial period. And I'm like most of you, Mr. Chair, the community knew that this was coming before council tonight, and I did receive calls in favor, and unfortunately I did also receive calls not in favor. So we're always, no matter when we sit around this table, we're always in the same dilemma. Nobody always agrees with everything. And I didn't like the idea that this might result in hiring more staff. I didn't care much for that. So I'll wait and see what the rest of my fellow councilors have to say, but.
Councillor Columbus.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I actually was going to put the motion on the floor that's in the report, so I'm kind of confused right now because Councillor Height has actually separated that actually to only allow hamlets, which would include places like Langton. I guess it wouldn't include Port Rowan then, would it? Okay, so, yeah, it'd include our hamlets and villages, so. I was going to oppose the raising of chickens in backyards because of what we heard here, predators and that type. So I've got to listen to everybody yet and think about what I'm going to do, being that it's only hamlets at this time.
Mayor Luke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will not be supporting raising chickens in an urban or hamlet residential zones in Norfolk County. Nothing against chickens. I'm off the farm. One of my jobs as a kid was to feed the chickens in the morning in the coop, and chickens taste good. So I have nothing against chickens. One of the issues I have, Mr. Chair, is that our resident, and I know that the motion only speaks to hamlet, I believe, not urban. One of the issues I have is, our neighborhoods, whether they're in a hamlet or an urban area, they're all different. They're not all the same lot sizes, closeness of my backyard to your backyard or side yards. And I think it's really great for people to experience having a few hens and go out and collect the eggs and eat them. But I think that potential problems will outweigh the benefits, especially when you can go to the farmer markets in the county or the grocery store, and many of them are open. Some of them are open, I should say, 24 hours, and eggs are, I think they're fairly reasonable in cost. It's just somewhat ironic. This morning I had, or yesterday, a complaint from the hamlet of Victoria that a neighbor had chickens and a cow in the backyard. Actually, it was a calf. They sent me a picture, but they said cow, sorry. And our bylaw very quickly went out and solved the issue because, as you know, the raising of poultry and livestock is not permitted in our hamlets or in our urban area. I could go on any side of the fence on this one. If the owner was always aware that the neighbors do not want to smell manure and everything was fine, why would you have a complaint? Unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way. So my decision is I don't support it, and I won't be supporting this motion. Sorry.
Counselor Sonnenberg.
Well, I'm glad the motion was split in half because I really wasn't in favor of chickens in a town, but I will support it in a hamlet. Hamlet, the concentration of people is less, and usually the backyard borders on a field of somebody else's, Very, very few hamlets have streets and backyards abutting one another. When the backyard's up against a fence bordering on a field, it's basically agriculture. So I don't see it too onerous. To me, 4 to 6 chickens is a whole lot less onerous than a barking dog or a marauding cat. Give me a half a dozen chickens any day over a barking dog. I'll support this. Thank you.
Counselor Brunton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe we should hire Colonel Saunders as a consultant. Maybe. I have a little bit of a problem with the motion, and the reason being, you said a 1-year review. How do we put somebody in a position in a hamlet, and there are hamlets where they don't back on farms, where they set up a chicken coop and fence it off and do everything. Then in 1 year's time, we tell them, oh, we changed our mind, tear it all down. I tend to think staff have got the right idea. Keep it out of the residential. And I look at hamlets, even though they're designated hamlet, they're residential. A lot of them are residential. So other than that, I have no problem if people want to have chickens anywhere else. But to have them even in a hamlet, I think is wrong. So anyways, thank you.
Counselor Columbus.
Mr. Chairman, I have made up my mind. And I'm not going to support the motion simply because of odor, flies, and the potential for threat to commercial flocks. I know Councillor Sonnenberg mentioned before about the limited number that we have, but if someone doesn't look after birds, we do get scares from time to time where bona fide chicken farmers who pay large amounts of dollars for their quota to house their chickens and produce chicken, there's a huge threat there. The other thing, and why reintroduce the problem? These chickens were legislated out of bounds in urban built-up areas for some reason years ago, because probably decades and decades and decades ago, a lot of people had chickens before they had fridges and stuff to keep their eggs in. They would keep chickens because they'd get fresh eggs all the time. They wouldn't have to cool them. And so we also get enough calls now as counselors about problems with bylaws being contravened. And I think this will just invite more calls to counselors with neighbor disputes. And like Mayor Luke said, eggs are cheap. You can pick them up for $2 or $3. It's probably the cheapest high-protein breakfast that you can get at $2 to $3. And if someone really wants chickens, maybe they have to relocate to a rural area outside of Hamlet or outside the urban area. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to put my 10 cents in. When we're going to talk about the hamlets, we have a lot of other things to think about. Neighbors, and there may be one neighbor in the hamlet or whatever that doesn't want to have chickens around or has chickens around, and it's going to create a lot of animosity. What we're going to do is we have a coyote problem, and you don't think that they're going to start looking for some of those chickens, and they can get into a lot of chicken coops, and even raccoons will break in to get the eggs and everything like that. So I can't support chickens in an urban area, whether it's a hamlet or a town or whatever. To me, that's not where they belong, so I will not be supporting the motion. Anyway, Councillor Height has moved, and I'll let the clerk read what he suggested.
Through the chair to committee, moved by Councillor Height, the staff report DCS 1757, backyard chickens feasibility review be received as information, and that council approve the raising of egg-laying chickens within hamlet residential zones in Norfolk County for a trial period of 1 year.
All those in favor? Those opposed? That is defeated. So now do we go back to the original one? Okay. Councillor Oliver?
Mr. Chair, I'll just move the recommendation in the report.
Okay. I'm not going to read it again. Is there any? Councillor Black? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I was just looking at some of my emails, and one that kind of stuck out, I think it was sent to everybody, that says, if my neighbor gets chickens in his backyard, I will have chicken soup the next day. So, yeah, it's, but everybody's right around the table. Like, you're gonna get different ideas from everyone, but I just don't think that, at least from what I hear, the majority of people in Simcoe say, I've heard some people say, yes, I would like to have them, but I've heard a lot more that say, no, I definitely do not want my neighbors to have chickens. So I'm going to support the motion.
You want to move the motion? Because I didn't.
Oh, well, sure, I'd move. I thought somebody moved it. No?
No, there was a motion to, just for hamlets, not for the, what was on our, did you
What?
originally?
I thought you moved the recommendation in the
Okay,
report.
we'll go back to that. Councillor Oliver, do you want to speak any more to it?
That's fine.
Okay, all those in favor? That is carried. Moving on to Deputation Susan Robertson, request for grant funding Lynn River Music and Arts Festival. Susan, please come forward. You have 10 minutes, and I'll let you know when you have 1 minute left.
Okay, thank you. My name is Susan Robertson, and I'm the festival coordinator for the Lynn River Music and Arts Festival. I'm here to ask council to consider a one-time request of $5,000 to support the festival this year. Now, I know that there is a process in place and that grant requests are due October 1st for funding in the following year. However, last fall, the Rotary Club of Simcoe, who had been organizing this festival since 2005, were deliberating as to whether they would continue to do so. So we did not submit this request. As it turned out, the club voted not to continue as the organizers of this festival in December of 2016. And the festival's committee chair offered to look for a group to organize the 2017 edition of the festival, and was pleased to announce that the Port Dover Board of Trade would agree to administer the festival under its umbrella. So this change in management required moving the office, which was in Simcoe, to Port Dover, to the Board of Trade offices, and quickly put an action plan together to make up for lost time. When I say that, traditionally, we would finish up with a wind-up meeting after the August festival, and then the Rotary Committee would bounce into organizing for the next year. So although we have a few Rotarians who still have offered to help with the transition of the festival, we no longer have a dedicated organizing committee, so we're really very busy trying to get all the pieces put together for this year. I contacted Chris Baird late in March to see if all of the 2016 grant funds had been allocated, and he advised me that there was still money available. So this year marks the festival's 50th anniversary. The event was previously known as the Simcoe Friendship Festival, and it was rebranded and reorganized in 2014. And I think with the Music and Arts Festival put into its name, it really was a greater emphasis put onto the live entertainment portion of the festival. The main stage lineup is where we would use this $5,000 grant money. The theme for this year's presentation is the past, the present, and the future. And we feature predominantly homegrown talent with musicians from across Norfolk County. It's going to be a celebration of each decade of music, showcasing memories of the past, the current sounds, and a glimpse into the young artists of the future. 100% of this grant money we're asking for will actually support local musicians. So I want to remind you that this is a free festival, that the programming over the long weekend in August provides activities and attractions for family members of all ages. We estimate that the festival brings about 30,000 people to Simcoe on the August long weekend, which brings tourism dollars to the area. It also brings vendors to the park from out of town, but it is also an important weekend for many businesses and nonprofits and service clubs in the area. A vendor's already phoned me and advised me that the hotels in Simcoe are already full. You had to go outside of Simcoe to get lodging. We have many community partnerships that allow us to keep this a free festival, a great family event. That's how we would like to continue operating the festival, and we hope that with your support we can do this. So I'd like to thank the chair and the councillors for your kind consideration of this request.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that there'll be some questions. Councillor Wells.
Thank you very much, Chair. So even though you are no longer in Simcoe, this activity will take place in Simcoe, am I correct?
That is correct. Yep, the festival remains as it was in Simcoe.
Councillor Brunton.
So I'm clear, this is the entertainment we always have had on the stage, like the different bands and groups that come on all through the weekend?
That's correct. There's actually now 3 stages that provide the entertainment throughout the weekend, but this funding would go towards the main stage acts.
Okay, and what, like, when the Rotary ran it,
Yes.
you say they funded it?
No, we've go out and get sponsorships and, as I say, have developed community partnerships over the year. I think what's a little different about this year is the time lag that we've had in planning the event, in our ability to get to sponsors, because for so long we didn't know, if the festival would continue.
Okay, so do you see it as an ongoing issue for funding? Or is it something if you had more time, you'd be able to fund it?
I think that that's exactly what we're saying, that, we're trying to cite this as a one-time ask.
Okay.
We don't expect to come back to council with asking for $5,000 support next year.
Thank you.
Councillor Columbus?
Thank you. What is your total budget expense to run this whole program? I don't know if you mentioned that or not.
Yeah, the total expenses are $69,565.
And you're looking for 5,000 from the county?
Yeah, the entertainment budget on the main stage is actually $17,000.
So you are out there working hard to make ends meet, I would think.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councillor Black? Did I have you?
Oh, I didn't have my hand up.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought I seen your hand up. Councillor Oliver?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Susan, for your deputation. I was really paying attention when you said to us that should we decide to grant an amount, 100% of those dollars will go to various artists that will be performing at the festival. Is that correct? In the form of honoraria or payments or covering their costs or whatever it might be?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Sonnenberg?
Thank you. We discussed a report earlier that mentioned volunteerism and how difficult it is nowadays to get people out to volunteer. What's your situation? Are you getting lots of help? A lot of people coming forward to volunteer for your event?
The Rotary Club did provide most of the manpower at the event over the years, and as I say, we are lucky enough that some of them love the festival and are coming back to help. We are reaching out to new groups. So, for instance, some operations in the beer tent, for instance, we're locating service groups, local community groups, and approaching their assistance and planning to share, hopefully, the profits with them. It is an ongoing problem for, as you well know, for every festival, every service club that goes on. But we have had interest so far. Yeah, we have.
Thank you.
Further from anyone? Councillor Mayor Luke?
Mr. Chair, I'll move we receive this deputation as information.
Thank you. All those in favor? Ms. Carried. You may sit down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Luke?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Johnson, and he probably can't answer this, but sometimes he can. We had asked the question the last week or so about grant money. I know that there was grant money left over. I know we've assigned a little bit of it. I don't know if there's anything. I think this is, well, I'll ask the question first.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I learned my lesson the first time. We have $22,000 left in the
Yes.
grants to others.
Mr. Chair, there's still 22 there?
That's what he said.
Well, he would know because he looks after the books. I would like to put a motion on the floor, if I may, that this council grant the $5,000 for this festival, and then I'll speak to it. I'll let the clerk get it down if you may.
It's being done as I speak. Councillor Black? No, we're waiting for the motion. You want to talk to the motion?
Yeah, I thought the mayor was going to.
You go ahead. I don't care whether I go first or
Oh, okay.
last.
Well, I am going to support the mayor's motion, and yeah, I understand the predicament that the festival is in, and I certainly would like to thank Port Dover Board of Trade for stepping up. It does seem a little bit unusual that Port Dover has come to the aid of Simcoe, and I really appreciate that. And I know Adam's in the audience, so that's great that we're working together this way. Not sure next year if it may go down to Port Dover, but whatever happens, happens. So I understand what Susan has said, and they were kind of put in a bit of a pickle this year by circumstances, so I will support the mayor's motion in providing the $5,000.
Okay, Mayor Luke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that we don't, and I don't like to do things this way. I'd like to set a budget, go from there. But this is not going to have a negative impact on our 2017 budget. There was even a recommendation somewhere along the way in our discussion back in December or January, maybe even a budget time, when we had $20-some thousand left over, that we re-advertised to see if more people, and council, it was a close vote, decided that, no, we just put the money, leave it there, and there will be opportunities as they come available. And this is one of them. And I guess in asking you to consider this, Susan said one-time deal, this is a little different situation when a traditional festival that's been there since I was a kid, well, almost, has changed hands more than once. And I really believe this group coming to the rescue could desperately use some assistance in seeing the transition to put on a successful festival will happen, and certainly this will certainly, I think, help that happen. So as much as we don't usually do things this way, I think this is a one-shot deal. And certainly next year, if the festival is successful and they want to continue, there is a means to apply for the grant. But this time, they didn't know until February that they were even going to, they were waiting, well, Susan so said they were waiting for a decision from the Rotary. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Oliver, and then Councillor Black.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to support Mayor Luke's motion. I appreciate that he put it on the table for us to discuss. For all of the same reasons that he's given, it's a transitional year. Susan mentioned in her deputation she knows about the October deadline, and I'm sure she or someone from the group will apply for a 2018 grant rather. And I'm particularly struck, as you heard me ask her a second time, about the fact that the money would go directly to Norfolk County artists, be they professional or amateurs. And I feel even better about the motion being approved because of that. So I'll certainly support it, and let's hope it'll be successful again as it has been.
Councillor Columbus.
Mr. Chairman, I too will support the mayor's motion. Features good local Norfolk County talent, and to spend $5,000 on a 69,000 plus program is a good value, I think, for the community.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
Through the chair to committee, moved by Mayor Luke that Norfolk County Council approve a grant in the amount of $5,000 from the budget line of Mayor and Council grants to others in support of the Lynn River Music and Arts Festival 2017.
All those in favor? That is carried. Moving on to deputation of Adam Very. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. Please come to the podium. And he's going to speak to a motion of Councillor Wells respecting parking in Port Dover. You have 10 minutes, sir, and I'll let you know when 1 minute's left.
I have some photographs. Who do I give the slide to, or the zip drive to?
Mr. Baird over here.
Mr. Baird. I'm just really going to speak to the photographs more than anything. I don't have much of a talk. So there's two things. One is parking. It is to Councillor Wells's motion, but I do have some other things about construction that was in my request for deputation. So can I do both? Is that?
You have 10 minutes, sir.
Very good. Okay, so with the construction, I do want to get to that first. There are just some things that we just need cleaned up in Port Dover. As you all know, the Main Street has been under construction for a couple years now, and the phase from Chapman to Clinton is now finished, but there are some things that are left, and I'm not sure where to go to get that amended, which is why I'm here to talk to council so that hopefully council can give some direction on getting that done. So I'll show you some photographs that essentially we have some tar footprints on the sidewalk. We have some stains from rusty garbage cans. We have some lines that haven't been repainted, and I don't know how to get that done. So we've invited counselors out to see that, just so I could sort of speak to it with some people having seen it. We did have Councillor Oliver, of course Wells has seen it. We had Councillor Height out, and then Charlie came, Mayor Luke came last week. So some of them know and have seen it, but I do want to show it to the rest of you just so we can figure out how we can get that done. Yeah, it would be under, not construction, mess. Well, there's some mess. So we're starting here. So we have, so this is the front of Schofield's. They had some concrete on the front of the building, which Navicon has come by and taken care of. But they did that with some kind of sanding or removal tool that has left some damage to the paint. And so we've talked to Navicon about that, and essentially, I'm paraphrasing, but it was, well, if we repaint that, we have to repaint the whole storefront. Fair enough. There's damage to the front of this restaurant that it wasn't the owner's fault. So we would like to have this repaired, please, for our membership. That's the front of Schofield's. Carry on, please, Chris. This is just a photograph of some of the footprints. So, pardon? Oh, the work boots? Yeah, so some of them are just from workers. So I just, again, wanted to show you that we do have some mess that needs to be cleaned up. Chris, if you could go, it's the same thing. There's a couple spots throughout the town. Those are from the garbage cans that were replaced. We had the nice decorative garbage cans that don't have that rust and that soft, or that hard surface that's firm down there. So again, rust that needs to be cleaned up, please. Same thing. That's a different spot. This is the parquet, Elmer Lewis. As you can see, the brickwork to the top there has been completed, but right up against the sidewalk, it's not done. There's just gravel there. So what you can't see is that there's actually a very trippable edge there also. So for one, it's for people walking. For two, it's just, the bricks are still piled against the Lakeside Savings, what used to be Giant Tiger. So they're there, what hasn't been lifted by people walking by and taking some bricks. But there are some bricks there that just need to be replaced, and it hasn't been done yet. Chris, if you could go ahead, please. And then that's sort of the length. So it's the entire length of the parquet is just this, it's about 2 feet of gravel. And then we're back to that. So this is just some unfinished things and a little bit of damage that we'd like to see done, please. The parking issue. So I guess let's start with the lost file, please, Chris. So we've lost some parking over the last maybe 5 to 8 years. It started with the traffic lights at Main and Market. This is now, I'm just sort of giving context. So when those lights went in, we lost 3 or 4 spots. With the bump outs, we've lost another 4 or 5. We've lost some on Clinton Street, which I'll show you in a moment. We've lost some up by Angelo's. Altogether, in the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a net loss of about 25 to 30 spots, depending on who you talk to and who you ask. As you know, Dover is busy in the summer especially, but our shoulder seasons in the fall and winter have picked up considerably over the last few years. So while right now there's a desperate need for parking downtown during the really nice months, we can see it where certainly parking is going to become an issue in the off-season as well. And as the new community or the new part of the community develops on the Dover Coast development, we can foresee certainly more people needing parking, but also we don't want downtown to become a spot where people don't want to go. So we would like to address some of that now. So Chris, if you could go on just showing the bump outs. So that's Clinton Street. For those who don't know, that runs alongside the Norfolk Tavern across from the Arbor down there. That used to be, you could get parking, you could get 12 to 15 cars in there on that, it used to be a soft shoulder. When the new construction was in, that's a curb now, so there is no parking, so that's another net loss of at least a dozen spots that is driving our beach people absolutely bananas. This was taken today, this afternoon, and there's nothing down there. Norfolk, sorry, can you go back one, Chris? Sorry. So Norfolk County actually owns most of that grass up to the building where Kelleher's is, which is unfortunately not in the photo, but there's several feet where that could have been soft shoulder or even angle parking if we had maybe had an opportunity to discuss that with staff, which we did not have. We met with staff and it was great for most of the construction, but this part was supposed to be later and it got moved up and sort of just in with the first section down by the arbor, so we never really got to have that feedback, but that's a huge loss of parking. So Chris, if you go to the next one. As you can see on this side of Clinton Street, there is a little bit of soft shoulder, but most of that is curb cuts for the parking lots that are down there. So what we would like to do, since we don't expect to be able to get rid of that Clinton Street curb, pardon? What has? That's today, that photo was taken. Oh, the decisions have been made? Okay, perfect. Then carry it, then move it along. Very good. Thank you. Chris, if you could skip through, we can stop. That's Clinton again. So there's a turning lane now on Main Street that turns left onto Chapman. That was another 3 or 4 spots that's lost right in front of Angelo's. Again, that was a surprise to us. We don't know where the left-hand turning lane came from. And I guess we understand that there's some kind of study done, but there's not really a lot down there. For people that turn left to. There's one business, 2, I guess if you count urban Parisian, but there's not really even anything where people are turning left other than just residential. And typically the people in town would turn down either Market to go that way anyways, or go further up one street to Nelson. So that's just another loss of parking on that turning lane. If you could go ahead, please, Chris. That was the stoplights, so never mind, we've already covered that. Carry on, please. And then we're back to the beginning. So, Chris, if you could go to the solutions, please. So one of the I'm sorry, Chris, I'm rushing here. Can you go to the lines, please, before we do this? So go back to the file, back one. Thank you, sir. So they're telling us they're not going to repaint lines on Main Street. They're going to have a line at where the beginning of parking would be and at the end of where parking would be, and people are kind of just hope to figure it out. As you can see, what starts to happen is there's 2 cars taking up basically 4 spots, or what could be 4 spots, because people just sort of park right in front of the building they're going to and don't really think about economy or efficiency. If you go through, Chris, if you can, that's not the best. Go through to another, there we go. So that's on Market Street where my office is, and I took several photos throughout the day just to show you how many spots were lost throughout the day. So if you could just go through them, Chris, as I'm talking. This is all today at different times. So as you can see, there's just cars parked wherever, and as much as parking is that's the other side of Market Street. Parking is a very scarce and crucial resource to downtown Port Dover right now, and we're losing spots just based on carelessness or not having somewhere to aim. So what we would like to see is, especially on Main Street, but even on some of these side streets, to have just lines painted for stalls that would solve a lot of our problems and create additional spaces. So Chris, that's good for this street. If you go to solutions, please. So one of the solutions that I'm proposing, and the councillors and mayor who have come down to see this have seen it in person, but Market Street is an extremely wide street, relatively speaking. What I would really appreciate seeing, or some kind of study done, could we have some angle parking at least on the right-hand side there? We could get quite a few more cars, and normally on that street we can get about a dozen. I've counted on a few different days. I bet you with angle we could get, even if it was 4 more or as many as 6 more spots, that would be tremendous for the downtown. That's, as you can see, that's right by the theater. Theater could use it. Certainly my office is in 23 Market, which is that gray building. We could use it. That's a Board of Trade offices in between those two. We could use it for visitors looking for information. There's a restaurant on the corner. There's a gym right here. I mean, these are all places that could use the extra parking. What I'd really, really like to see is angle on both sides of the street and make that a one-way. And I know the traffic study needs to be done. We've asked staff about that. They've said that would be thousands. We said, well, is that 5,000 or is that 100,000? They said, they're not sure, but it'd be closer to 100,000 to do a traffic study. So we said, okay. So why I'm asking for a one-way, so we can get the double parking on there, but also that street that you see on the horizon, that's Main Street. There is not a lot of options for people turning left on that street because it's narrow. So what we have sometimes is people that are trying to turn left that get bogged at that red light. You have people backed up in the summer all the way to the bridge. and we get one car per light turning left down here. If they couldn't turn left, that would improve the flow of Main Street considerably, we think. What that would also do is people turning right down this street. Again, I realize it's the driver's responsibility to be careful, but you can't always see the people that are crossing that street to go to the theater from that right-hand turn. People walk out, they're having fun. Sometimes it's seniors that take a little bit longer to get across the street to go to the theater. Eliminating that turn on coming from both directions would be, I think, safer for our tourists down there, but also get rid of that log jam turning left, coming into Market Street. So that's a solution. We think we can create a number of different spots, improve some safety. That's where we're at. Chris, if you could go back to the main, oh, that's the other side of Market, just another view. Could you go back to the, where the files are? Because I do want to just show one other street. This is not the best. Can you go to the one that's called Left Turn, right at the top, Left Turn, right there. This doesn't super show what I'm talking about, but we have a left turn issue here coming from Market East. So it's a one-way that heads this way. Where you're looking to the left is the stoplights at Main and Market, so we just looked at the other side from Market West. That's a really quick left-hand turn into that. What you can't see on the right is that there's kind of a blind spot there where the bank is. When we were down there talking to staff about the potential for having patios in front of Lago, there was 2 or 3 near misses just there during that time. What we also have is people that are hauling trailers or sometimes boats, but usually it's trailers. You can't even get into that lane turning left. So what we would like is a no left turn there. We've talked to the bank, we've talked to Stoney's, they're big time in favor. We just see it as a potential to save a couple accidents. And again, people trying to cross that street there, when you get people that get antsy because they're waiting to turn left, it's just a problem that we can avoid now if we are a little bit proactive. So that's it in a nutshell. We just like to improve the flow and improve some traffic conditions. And actually, even the background, unintentionally on that photo, you can see again, more sort of haphazard parking on Main Street. So if we could have the stalls back, that would be tremendous.
You're down to 1 minute.
I am done.
Okay, very good. Questions? Councillor Mayor Luke.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'll pass.
There, Councillor Brunton?
Just a question to you, Adam. Adam, the streets where they aren't marked, I assume they haven't put the top lift of asphalt on yet, have they?
No, they have. We had Sean Van Acker at one of our meetings, and he specifically said they are not painting stalls. Like, that's not happening. They're going to have a line at the beginning of parking and the end of parking, the end.
Even, okay, so the top lift is done?
Yeah, that's where the footprints came from.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yep.
I didn't realize that.
Yep.
All right, that's all I wanted. Thank you.
Further from anyone? If not, I will have a motion to receive the deputation. Councillor Columbus, all those in favor? That is carried. You may sit down. Thank you. Is there anything further from anyone? Mayor Luke.
Can I ask a question through you to staff?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, we have received the deputation. We have been made aware of some of things that the Board of Trade would like to see, as Adam put, cleaned up. And then the other issue was, of course, to look at some parking changes down there. So I just wanted to ask through you to Lee, what would be the best way, in your opinion, to address these issues?
Through the chairman to council, I'm going to address a whole bunch of them in a whole bunch of different ways. With respect, I'm going to start with the construction. We have been made aware by the Board of Trade of a bunch of those. We're working with our contractor to get appropriate schedule from them to actually address it. So we are aware of all of those deficiencies and we are working with them. I know that the contractor hasn't been super cooperative with the Board of Trade with respect to that, but we are dealing with that as a contractual matter, so we're getting that stuff addressed. With respect to the line painting with the parking spaces, staff's intention was not to mark the parking spaces, monitor how it goes. It's going extremely poorly. Last week, staff were instructed to place the stall markings back on the road. The intention was to see how it goes. Sometimes it works really well and sometimes it doesn't. It's not working well. We're losing more parking spaces by poor parking. So staff have already been instructed that when we have the line painter in the area, we will be reinstalling all of the stalls. With respect to Clinton Street, I believe, Councillor Oliver, we did do that, much to some of staff's scrambling. I did instruct some changes to be made to some of the curbing that was done to allow for rollover curb so that we wouldn't affect the parking, as we've seen through some of the other phases what happened. So we did address that. We placed different type of curb to ensure that we wouldn't lose any additional parking spaces. The remainder of the comments that were made were also in the letter that was forwarded to staff from, I'm not sure who, I can't remember off the top of my head who it was from, and that staff had instructed, council had instructed staff to prepare a report. We are preparing that report. It will be back here on July 11th. So we'll be here next Tuesday for council's consideration, and we have talked about addressing all of those sorts of things, and we'll make sure that Adam is circulated on that. In summary, I can say that Public Works definitely acknowledges that there is some parking concerns in the Port Dover area, and we are recommending through that report that as part of the 2018 budget deliberations that we include an item for a parking study for Port Dover, very comprehensive study for Port Dover, not looking at it on an isolated basis, but as the community, because there's significant growth in the community and significant more growth scheduled to take place, and we need to address the parking and get out ahead of it.
Thank you.
Further? Sorry.
Sorry, I forgot one more item. With respect to Market Street, Main and Market, the left-hand turns, the angle parking, we're recommending that we refer that to a traffic study and just have a quick review of that done to see if those changes will have a positive impact or a negative impact. So we're also recommending that that be looked at as well.
Mr. Chair, if I may apologize on that issue. Do you believe that, say, by October, November, we'll get some recommendation or report? As you say, it won't be a heavy-duty report, but on possible traffic flow, left turn, angle parking. Is that what you're thinking?
Through the chairman, if council agrees to implement that next week when the report comes forward, we could certainly do the traffic study very, very productively so that we could probably have a report in front of council late September, early October.
Excellent.
But it wouldn't address parking because our recommendation is that the parking study for Port Dover be included as part of the 2018 budget deliberations.
Yep, that's fair.
So that wouldn't include angled parking, but it would certainly talk about left-hand turns and all of that sort of stuff.
I got it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anything further? We'll move on then. Sorry, Councillor Oliver.
I was just going to publicly thank Ms. Robinson for acting quickly on these concerns when they were brought to our attention as councillors, and the letter that was received. I, for one, really appreciate the fact their staff are acting on some of these concerns, so thank you.
Okay, the next thing it's reordering of the agenda. 9A, motion of Councillor Wells to be considered after the deputation of Adam Berry. Sorry, you're on for your motion. The reordering of agenda. Motion of Councillor Wells to be considered after deputation. Remember when we started, we made that, you're up. You had a motion that you put forward?
I have a motion.
Yes?
Okay. I'll turn on my microphone so that you
helps.
won't miss my words of wisdom here. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Now, I don't want any of you to think that I am losing my brain, but actually I am going to ask you to spend money. I know, and I'm not sick either, and I know it sounds hypocritical, but here it comes. I'm asking council to support a request to have staff look into finding property for sale in downtown Port Dover for a parking lot and for an extra washroom. Why now? We sit around this table making many decisions. Most times they turn out okay. But sometimes with positives come negatives. And I cite for an example, when we approved the retail development on the Queensway. It was good for commerce, wonderful. But unfortunately, it was not so good for the Simcoe downtown. I think that would be a fair comment to make. And if we allow more development on the Queensway, it will affect the commercial area even more so on downtown Simcoe. But that is where the investors want to invest, not downtown. Fortunately for Dover, at this time, we have a very vibrant downtown. And I'd like to see it remain vibrant. But I am worried. As the Dover coast develops, I tend to think this area will develop into a commercial core, which will affect the commercial area of downtown. And I see the same thing happening in Dover that happened in Simcoe, that the commercial area will move out there and Dover downtown will, unfortunately, suffer. People are funny. They spend hours exercising. They spend hundreds in getting physically fit. And yet, when it comes to shopping, unless they can stop right in front of the store where they want to go in, they won't stop. That's too far. Strange, aren't we? We are strange people. No parking, no shopping. I think that's the philosophy. I'm hoping by finding more parking in downtown, this will help to keep our downtown healthy and viable. Better to have a proactive approach than a reactive approach, which is what we're doing now, trying to find a solution for downtown Simcoe. And I prefer that we don't have that same problem in Port Dover. And unfortunately, as much as I hate to say it, probably we as councillors around this table did cause the problem in Simcoe, so let's not be responsible for causing the same problem in Port Dover. So I'm asking you to have staff look at the possibility of obtaining, obviously they wouldn't buy it, they'll have to come back with a report to council to see whether or not there is available property for parking in downtown Port Dover. That is my request, Mr. Chair, and I'll answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Any questions to Councillor Wells? What I have in front of me here is a notice of motion that you came forward to, and it reads, it's moved by Councillor Wells that Port Dover parking and that staff be directed to investigate available property for purchase in Port Dover suitable for parking purposes. Councillor Black.
I have to say, I really appreciate Councillor Wells admitting what he has admitted, that all the commercial development approved by this council has created a problem downtown. But I'm not so sure that additional parking will be the answer in Port Dover. It certainly isn't the answer in Simcoe because we do have lots of parking. But having said that, I recognize the fact that Port Dover has limited parking. And I do believe that they need it, and this on an ongoing basis. And also, like during times when Friday the 13th and that sort of thing, and they seem to solve some of that interim problems by using shuttles and empty farmers' fields. But I think what he's talking about is on an ongoing basis, there is a shortage of parking. There has been for years and years. So I would support Councillor Wells's motion. I think at the very least, we need to have a look and identify if there are some properties where we can provide some additional parking close to the downtown.
Further, Councillor Columbus.
Yes, I will support the motion of Councillor Wells. It's just that it's too bad we didn't know this a couple years ago when we actually disposed of the library property. That would have probably been an ideal site at the right price.
Hindsight's always wonderful.
Mayor Luke.
I will definitely support this, and I would support this type of motion for any one of our downtown urban areas in the county. And I think it's good foresight to look ahead. I mean, obviously, there's a parking problem now, and it's not going to be any better next year or the year after. As a matter of fact,